All
Sir,
right, what up?
how you doing?
What's good? Alhamdulillah,
Thanks
I'm
for.
good. How you feel?
I feel good. Thanks for taking a minute. I want to talk to you, talk to people. I was just playing a little. I need a girl, a little old school loon. Let me make sure you
Little
get.
throwback, huh?
Yeah, it was just buffering for a sec. Little throwback. Should I call you? Should I call you Loon or Chauncey or what?
Amir would be suitable, but you remember if you seen
Amir
the
works for
Breakfast
me,
Club?
sir.
Yeah, if you saw the Breakfast Club interview, I gave my disclaimer about as far as those that know me for Loon, I'm not appalled. Those that know me for Amir, alhamdulillah, and those that know me as Chauncey, that's sandbox stuff. Like,
Yeah. Well, Amir, I'll just tell people. There's people that will hear from me and for you. For me, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. We do the news, we do culture, we do music. Amir is coming out of a whole bid that you did. I know you just got released, I believe slightly early with some of the people that were advocating for you as well as from COVID. So, um, so first of all, how are you feeling? How are you holding up?
now I feel great, yo. I feel great. Like, words can't really explain, you know, being incarcerated for a long period of time unjustly, which is something that's common amongst many of the, inhabitants of the federal prison system and state prisons as well, that, the time doesn't fit the crime. So when you have to gauge or wrap your mind around the immense amount of time that one is given for, low drug, 10, 20 years, leadership roles and stuff like that, you can't really fathom what it's like to survive something like that and return to a place where you was once familiar, where your support team and your loved ones and everybody reside, to return to that space is definitely overwhelming, and it's something that I want for every single individual who's deserving of it.
Yeah. I mean, Amir, for people's background, so some people will know you from back in the day from being a bad boy artist, as I said, performing as Loon. Uh, in your case, my understanding is you were brought in basically on a drug conspiracy. So we talk a lot about how these cases work. To the extent you're comfortable talking about it, you were not accused of violence or a homicide or something like that. You were in on this a drug dealing conspiracy. And then um, what was your total charge, by the way? What was your total bid? The
My
original sentence?
sentence, yeah, I was sentenced to 168 months, which equates into 14 years. And my case was barely really like an introduction. Like, Ari, that's such and such, that's Ari. Y'all cool? Whatever y'all got going on, I'm cool. Y'all straight? I got each other numbers? All right, I'm out. That's basically the gist of my case. So when individuals who actually conspired to sell heroin or whatever the case may be got arrested, sentenced, put in prison, they felt compelled to reach back and create a narrative that a prosecutor could eat up. Let's grab this guy, he's a public figure, you know? And then I had 2 prior convictions. So now the cards are stacked against me. So if I go to trial, an innocent man pleading that maybe the extent of my involvement was just this introduction, you know, I was willing to go to trial and fight for that. But now you're looking at the trial tax. 2 prior convictions, I get 2 851 enhancements, I get mandatory life. So the
Wow.
only thing that was on the table was 14 years, 168 months. So I had to take that.
And just for clarity, as we talk about justice reform, and as I'm sure you know, some people have been working on this a long time. I mean, like a lot of attorneys, had an interest in it. I used to do some work with the public defender's office, but the wider national conversations, people are waking up to some of this and the systemic racism. You're telling people in your situation, we're facing no violent charge, no murder charge, nothing like that. If you didn't do what they were pressing you to do, you could have been in for life without physically
Absolutely.
hurting anyone. There are other people who go in and out of the system less time than that, and they killed someone.
Absolutely. And that's the racial disparity and the dysfunction within the criminal justice system that actually plagues minority communities all across the board. You know what I'm saying? Like, see, me having experience in the federal prison system is different from someone who may have had experience in state prisons. Because like state prisons, they're a little bit more liberal, they're a little more flexible. So a lot of the efforts for people who advocate to combat some of these injustices in state prisons have. But when you're dealing with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, this is like dealing with a whole nother government within the United States government.
Yeah.
And the proof of that is what just took place with William Barr. He gave the Federal Bureau of Prisons the discretion, which I think he should have mandated, but he gave them the discretion to assess low and minimal security inmates and release them due to COVID under the CARES Act. Now, what happened was, in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, instead of using the discretion to minimize the risk of, not being able to social distance, they went to other, avenues and alternative methods to impede the process, and in most cases just stagnate the process in totality, to where a lot of guys still remain in this high risk situation of COVID-19. So the thing is, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, anything that you inject into it has to be BOP wide. You can't take a particular institution and show a favoritism to it, or inject certain programs that may be beneficial and not do it all across the BOP. So like I said, it goes back to like the difference between state prisons and Federal Bureau of Prisons. This is a behemoth opposed to state prisons that may be more liberal, more flexible, and it's not such a high chain of command that you have to, go through in order to get results.
And so we track this in certain cases. You're talking about the fact that discretion is something that a system often needs, federal or state. But if discretion means people then in power are making these choices, right, then it reinforces exactly the problems, the systemic problems that we've all been talking about, right? So if you say, oh, sometimes there's a reason why something looks bad, but you have the discretion to go easier on someone. In an individual case, that might be fair. That might be the most fair thing if someone was doing it in an enlightened way for the right reason. But if the discretion's only used to reinforce the power structure, so the rich people with the connections and the lawyers and the white people and this and that, then they are getting those breaks, and the harshness is for everyone else, and that goes back to the problem. So what else did you learn sort of coming out of this experience? What did you learn that you want to apply now? Because on the one hand, you went through this. On the other hand, here we are today talking. I'm meeting you like so many Zooms. I'm meeting you this way. I haven't met you in person, but here you are with your life, the rest of your life ahead of you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I learned is that many of the inmates in the Federal Bureau of Prison, they're not aware of all of the people who actually advocate for justice, for these inmates. So you have this one guy who, he has a newsletter. His name is Jeremy Gordon, and this guy, he pretty much pretends to be very instrumental and active in advocating for the inmates. So he's the person that's known. FAM is another organization who actually advocates. They are known. But a lot of people don't know about the Alice Johnsons, the Jessica Jacksons, the Van Jones, the Weldon Angeloses, the Bishop Omars, the Laura McCanns, and so on and so forth, the Elizabeth Cokes, the Mark Holdens. All of these people I came to learn about based on the efforts of Weldon Angelos, who for 19 months, consistently without no waiver, fought for my clemency petition. So then when it got down to certain things that were not foreseeable or able to control, like, the impeachment process, that hindered the process of my clemency. Then later came COVID, and then going through all the administrative remedies within the prison system in accordance to what William Barr had suggested, those things were shot down. So what Weldon did, and we both did collectively, was write a 34-page emergency compassionate release motion, which I ultimately got.
So you were,
So
partly because you had allies, some people on the outside, you were able to get the specific advocacy. In other words, you needed people to say, people on the outside don't realize it's not like, oh, COVID, they're just letting people out. No, you need to
yeah,
go through that lane.
yeah. But the point is, Weldon was a complete stranger to me. So was Alice Johnson, Jessica Jackson, who also advocated for my clemency petition. So my point was to say there wasn't no special treatment for Loon or no special treatment for Amir. It was just that I was able through mutual friends to connect with that network.
But how did they
Meaning
come to
that
advocate the case? Do they advocate for people in these situations and who are incarcerated in general?
absolutely. I mean, if you look at Reform Alliance, which is Jay-Z, Meek Mills,
Yeah.
Robert Kraft, and Van Jones and Jessica Jackson, their advocacy has been effective, in state prisons and alongside with certain, components of the federal prison. Weldon Angelos, who, also who's, advocating and was instrumental in, aiding and assisting and getting the First Step Act passed. So basically all of these efforts that are taking place, a lot of the inmates in the prison system are not aware of. So my thing is, what I learned is that I want to burn the candle from the other end. Meaning, if these people who are advocating, passing legislation, and doing all of the things that are necessary from a place of compassion and concern, and not experiencing prison at all, for the most case, how do you create, a situation where the inmates can show their gratitude, right? By not only implementing these conditions or these legislation that's put in place to aid in the system, how can I return to society and not only be relevant, but be competitive? So when I say burning the candle from the other end, how do you put the contingencies in place in the federal prison system that allows them the opportunity to thrive through the course of their incarceration and return with not only some sense of dignity, honor, but the skills that's required in order to be relevant or competitive or to be contributors of society? So without those things put in place, it almost becomes like a sabotage. Like you want to leave open the opportunities for recidivism, opposed to if we're going to pay attention and implement certain things to advocate or actually to implement certain conditions that help these inmates return to society, why is the same effort not being taken place within the prison system? So me seeing that and seeing that like the higher echelon of education is the GED. A lot of the programs that they have like on the computer, they like ACE programs or something like that. So if you go to a job interview with those and you leave, you probably hear those in the shredder. You'll probably hear those the little cheap certificates being shredded because they're only done to just say I'm doing something in prison. But none of this is contingent upon being recognized, and being honored and utilized in the workforce. So how do you put these things in
And
place
let
that
me
these
ask
people
you,
have an opportunity
Amir,
to
I was looking at
return
your case.
and be productive?
Yeah. Let me ask you even beyond that lane. In your case, you had this Judge Boyle say at the end, okay, you don't pose a threat to society. And
Yeah.
you're about 45 now after, as mentioned, 8 years on the bid. What does that mean to you to go through this system? Doing a sentence, as we discussed, is hard. And be told at the end, okay, the judge officially says you're not a threat. Does that mean you feel like, but at some point they were treating you like a threat, or this was an overly harsh sentence for all the reasons we discussed? What do you take from that for people who look at this now, particularly during this national dialogue, and say, this has got to be changed from the ground up?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to understand that the whole demeaning perception is established initially when you enter the prison system. You're a monster, you're all these things coming in, right? Going out is the only time this becomes relevant, and not saying in Judge Boyle's eyes, but just saying in particular, the sympathy or the empathy rather starts to settle in the heart after this case is placed before you 20 to 30 years later, you realize that you were instrumental in handing out 360 months to life like it was candy.
Hmm.
So now when this case comes back in your face, it's like, wow, this guy has been gone for 30 years. He has clear conduct. He's a nonviolent offender. He's achieved all these things within the prison system. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Now I start to have some type of consideration or compassion. But coming in, you're already, stigmatized, or you're already perceived to be an animal, a monster. You sell drugs to kids. Like, this stuff don't even be on your paperwork. You're like, there's nothing there to say I sold drugs to kids at a elementary school park. But they treat you as if like these
Right.
were your targets. These were the people that, that suffered. And everybody gets into this whole extensive narrative of the effect of drug dealing, right? But when it comes time to hand out the prison system, when it comes time to, to return to society, now it becomes, okay, wow, I didn't know that we did this to this guy. Or, wow, I didn't know that,
Yeah.
this guy, has been fighting for his life for 20 years. Maybe we
Let me
should give
ask
him.
you this. What's been the biggest difference in your adjustment from when you went in to coming out now? We're here talking on a platform that didn't exist when you went in, IG.
Well, you're absolutely right. And to me, I believe that with social media, right? It's enabled the people to have a platform to express things that they never would have had the opportunity to express in a forum that they never would have ever been able to be heard, and so on and so forth. But the abuse of it, is something that has to come with it. But for the most part, since I've been home, I've seen that people have utilized social media, especially in this current climate of, social and economic disparity, racial disparity, so on and so on, police brutality. All of these things are documented now. All of these things are, tangible because of social media. So now the conversation about these issues have to change. We can't act like it wasn't
Mm.
seen. They're not just taking the word of a victim. You actually seeing it. You understand? You seeing it
So
with
do
your
you come
own
out,
eyes.
do you feel more hopeful, or you wouldn't go that far?
I always feel hopeful, because I know that there's an all capable God that facilitates the affairs of all of creation. We're all just passengers. We're trying to do the best within the scope of what we're capable of doing. And that makes me hopeful for those who sincerely understand that and move towards, utilizing that ability to do what you can. You understand?
Yeah.
But ultimately, our affairs are in the hands of our Creator. So you can't never lose hope when you understand that.
Right.
Now, the fact that this generation is more aware and more actively involved and more instrumental in establishing change, this is a phenomenon. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that nobody in position of power or authority should ignore that.
Right.
Because this is something that happened organically because of the way society is and how certain events take place in our society. So these are homegrown situations that go completely through, every ethnicity, every faith, every human person that has some moral understanding of what right is and what wrong is. So when you have this happening organically, and you have people out there that try to silence this, it just shows you, who's for the solution and who's a part of the problem.
Yeah, for sure. It's very interesting because you've been through this experience, and we can learn a lot when we listen to what people have been through.
Yeah.
And yet, this whole situation is hard because we're dealing explicitly with people who are disappeared or marginalized from not only the conversation but from free life. I am curious. While I have you, I had a thing with Shine recently, who also was on the Bad Boy label, who also went in.
Yeah. Yeah, shout out to Sean, yo.
Shout out
He
to
look good
Shine.
too, man. He look like he taking care of himself too.
Yeah, he's moving forward. He's running for office down in Belize. Shout out to Kim Asario, by the way,
Yeah,
who some people may know has been on the beach. She linked this up and got me introduced to you to have this
absolutely.
convo, and I'll leave this up so people can see it. I am curious on the music front. Um, this is a story that people have heard. This has happened in different situations, but where are you on that? Have you heard from Diddy or any of the Bad Boy folks? And you're not in that space right now anymore, but is any of that still relevant to you? What do you think back on from those times? And at a cultural level, a lot of people, remember that, live through that. It's meaningful to them, even if you're not necessarily making music tonight.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, like I mentioned, saying that, I've completely abstained from music and the music business. But the one thing that still remains is I established some very beautiful and meaningful relationships with a lot of people who are still relevant in the music business. So with me being in a different space and having a different passion and a different mission, it enables me to utilize those relationships for the benefit of what I'm trying to do and something that, a lot of these guys are also adamant about. I actually spoke to Puff today. I'm scheduled to go out to LA, and handle some business out there as far as like, sitting with individuals about, my book deal, my 6-part documentary series, and, and I'll be working towards a podcast as well. So
Oh,
I
great. And you spoke
definitely
to Diddy today.
institute. Yeah, I spoke to him this morning. We've spoken a couple times since I've been out. It's just that, you know, I expect to kind of go through the gauntlet, of like, questions that, are relevant in everybody's mind and heads, and like, Puff and maybe some of the things or people's perception of how, some of his business interactions with some of the artists on Bad Boy and so on and so forth. This is expected, But, like, fast forward, over a decade later, it's like I don't live in that space no more, And to have a conversation with Puff and knowing that he doesn't live in that space. So it's like, these are things that become escapable, for me, alhamdulillah, but maybe for some other individuals, it may not, it might be inescapable or something that remains, lingering. But I don't allow those things to dictate how I interact with people who actually are good people first and foremost and want good. You know what I'm saying? So from my conversations with Puff, have all been positive, It's all been contingent upon what we can come together and do, to combat some of these injustices in the prison system. I spoke to a guy that's very close to him, mutual friend we have by the name of Buck, and he came home from a lengthy sentence and he's been instrumental in the Buried Alive, organization. So Puff is actually involved, But I'm trying to figure out how to do business with Sean John Combs. That's the businessman. That's the guy who wears the business hat. That's the guy who's instrumental in things that maybe a lot of
You're
people don't
talking,
not aware.
yeah, you're talking about the different identities. And sometimes in the public realm, we see the persona, we think that's the person, and the business person you're saying is much more who he is today than some of that
Absolutely.
persona.
And that's the guy that should be revered as far as
Mm.
like what he's brought to the business is Sean John Combs. If you look at his clothing line, it's Sean John. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you, I guarantee if any check has his name on it, it says Sean John. So the whole P Diddy thing, you know what I'm saying? I was able to experience, P Diddy, the artist, the music mogul, the producer, so on and so forth. But when you deal with Sean, it's a whole different person. This is a father, This is someone who has, compassion in his heart. This is a person that actually,
Mm-hmm.
has done some
Mm-hmm.
positive things and, has some very lucrative and successful businesses and so on and so forth. So his whole career is not just revolved around music. And right now, mine is not revolved around music at all. So this gives me an opportunity to link up with a lot of successful people. I've been, having conversations with Kanye. Me and him spoke when I flew into New York. He was nice enough to, let me fly with him on the jet. I arrived in New York for the
We're
first time
talking,
at the
we're talking Kanye West.
Kanye West. I don't know another Kanye. Do you?
Do I know another Kanye? I mean, I know on the new Travis Scott, he says they're looking for a Kanye, not
Oh
Kanye.
yeah.
But yeah, he would be the
Oh
one.
man. Well, I'm about to look because I don't even, I haven't heard no, I don't even know who Travis Scott is. Not to be funny, it's just I'm not, I'm really out the loop.
Right,
Like
because
honestly, yeah, I'm like Uncle Ruckus right now.
no
Like I
respect. I
don't
mean,
know.
that's something respect because so Travis is a big artist out of Texas, and does a lot of different stuff, has a whole sound. But really respectfully to what you're saying, and I say this with the platform I have, um, we have a prison system, right, that wraps up people and takes them away. Then we ask them to come back into society and prove themselves again, even after they've quote unquote paid their time. So I've dealt with this, music or not, I mean, I've dealt with this talking to people who've been incarcerated who they're cut off from the information system, the technology, obviously the culture, right? For the most part, depending on the situation, you might get some books, you might get some access to some TV. Um,
Yeah,
but that's real. Of course, people aren't going to know whatever the
yeah.
topic. They're not going to know. So I'm not obviously, I take that seriously. But that's interesting. How did you and Ye even connect then?
I known Kanye for years. I known Kanye like when he was, just starting out in the business. So, I know John Monopoly for years as well. You know what I'm saying? And Akon brother, Boo, is also, instrumental in Kanye's career. So with this, this connection between mutual friends, we were able to get together and have great conversation. It's like I saw the same Kanye that I knew years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Although or despite some of the controversies and so on and so forth, those are things that, we all have to some way or some point navigate through being public figures, being human beings with overwhelming success and so on and so forth. And everybody endures it different and everybody repels it different, and everybody deals with it different. But for me, I saw the same, Kanye West that I knew almost 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And it was a thrill to be able to hang out with him. You know what I'm saying? So when I told him that I was, flying to New York to see my grandmother and my mother, who had, who had heart condition, and she was one of the conditions of my compassionate release, you know, and by explaining that, which actually, adds to what I'm saying as far as his character being the same, is that he immediately extended himself like, yo, I'm going to New York. Let me drop you off. You know what I'm saying? Now he's saying this like this a car. So I'm like, okay, drop me off. Like, we gonna get in the car? Like, you know what I'm saying? But he, invited me and my entire family, you know what I'm saying, my wife and my children, and we flew private to New York and, and have all this filmed and documented for my documentary. So, I bumped into Fabulous, you know what I'm saying, a good friend of mine as well, bumped into Jada Kiss, you know what I'm saying. I've been speaking, I bumped into Mike Epps, all the people that
Mm.
you see me actually following on Instagram are people I actually knew. So it's not like I'm out here like scavenging for like followers and stuff like that. Like
I
these are
feel you.
people
And
I'm actually,
let me say for the people watching this, so you're saying that because you've been on this life journey. I mean, people have different stories, right? This
yeah,
is some to be from inside, to get out, to go back to what you're saying. So you said you got some of this on video. This is going to be part of your documentary.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's like, I believe that, my journey is far more, what I'm saying, interesting than people know.
Mm.
Because, what's more relevant in the minds and hearts of a lot of people was my career at Bad Boy.
Sure.
But me personally, and people that actually know me, I'm talking about really, really know that that's just a drop in the bucket. So me chronologically going from everything before that, leading to that, then passing that and leading to today, what I'm saying? I think it's a beautiful story of evolution, multiple transitions and growth. So when
Respect.
people see this, hopefully it'll open the eyes of individuals who may have great, great things, coming for them, but remain stagnated in certain places. You know what I mean? And I believe that my journey shows that you can't remain stuck, especially if you have high aspirations, you have, great talent or abilities. You have to utilize those things to continue moving forward.
Well, part of what you're saying today, which I think is interesting for people to hear, is you're not defined by the past, be it the high or the low. You're not on some glory days shit where people are like, oh, but when I was quarterback, when I was 17, that was it. And it's like that might have been great, or you might have had more even eyes on you at that moment.
Yeah,
But you don't want to live in that high, even if it was a legitimate high, you had your bad boy time, your artist time, you had this run-in with the law, you had the time in prison. You and I both know from being around it in different ways, some people get so defined by that it's very hard for them to see a way out or see a future, which is understandable.
Absolutely.
But you're not being defined by the high or the low. Now, on a superficial level, I got to ask, is the inside of Kanye's plane really stylish, or is it like a normal plane?
Let's just say it was comfortable. We leave it at that.
I feel like this could be me, the fan, talking, but like in my mind's eye, because I don't ever, obviously, I'm not in a position where I'm ever on a private plane, but I imagine like a banker's private plane might just be straightforward. I imagine Kanye's to be just like on some other, on some new
Hey,
wave.
look, but you got to remember though. You got to remember, I frequently flew in jets with Puff. You know what I'm saying? So the whole G5, G6, I don't know what plane they on now. Citation 10, Cessnas. I've flown all of these type of, planes, and it's like, to me, I always looked at it as a means. Because that's another part of like being in the business. The tools that you use to maintain or obtain success become more and more, I would say, not to say expensive, but more accessible, so to say. So the means that took you to get into getting a deal versus now you got the deal. So now the means that it take to get you to the show, now you get the money. Now the means that, so the means remain, they just change.
Yeah.
And if people get too like invested in the brand, the label, and so on and so forth, then even a person that's in a position of success can be stagnated. You know what I'm saying? Because now you're stuck. Like you're stuck with labels when it really is just a car. You know what I'm saying? Like, It's an expensive car. It's a nice looking car. But it is still just a car.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite memory or song from that period though? Like we all have our own, but like do you have something where you look back on fondly?
Wow. That's a really good question because, I've had a lot of fond memories. But I think that the greatest thing that happened to me, Ari, and I'm just being 100% honest, is when I found Islam. Because the overwhelmingness that comes with the repetitiveness of the music business, the lifestyle, the smoking, the drinking, the fornicating, the clubbing, and so on and so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? At some point, whether people want to admit it or not, it does become kind of redundant. You know what I'm saying? It does become, kind of habitual, so to say, to where the emotion and attachment is not even there. And you get to a point where you become a vampire, so to say. See, like right now, your excitement. I don't have that excitement no more because I've been living it, right? So now I have to live vicariously through you. You understand? And I call that like the vampire phase. So like, I already never seen a Ferrari. To me, it's like a Honda. I drive it so much, I'm accustomed to it, right? but when I see Ari eyes light up, it's like I throw Ari the keys, I jump in the passenger seat, you driving, you fascinated with the little buttons, and I'm just looking at you like, it might even make you uncomfortable because I'm just looking at, how happy you are.
Well, I know what you mean because I'll tell you, in New York, you're when you first get to New York, you're wide-eyed. When you're there long enough, even if you love it, even if you're a Brooklynite, New York, or Queens, Harlem, whatever, you could tell after a certain amount of time, all right, we live here now, whatever. But then when you have a friend in town to New York, you start seeing it again through their eyes. If I'm walking my friend through Bed-Stuy or even Times Square, which I'm not about Times Square, but if a friend's from Kansas, I'm like, they're like, whoa. So what you're talking about is that natural energy, which on the one hand is positive, but also is the indicator that you are no longer authentically feeling it for the first time.
Yeah, or you're immune to the drug. You're immune to the addiction that came with the initial high.
Respect.
Right? So now, what I'm saying, and what happens with people who, slip into the coma of using more sophisticated drugs, the same thing happens. Yep. You start actually adding to the first high. You start doing things to try to salvage the same feeling. So that's why I said the most beautiful experience was for me was finding an escape, like a legitimate escape, not an Oprah Winfrey makeover, not like like a real escape. You know what I'm saying? Because I could tell you just to give you a piece of some of the rhetoric in my documentary is like, I used to try alternative methods to get over certain things. For example, you feel a kind of way, you go buy something expensive. You feel good for a moment, then it kind of disappears. You go on an expensive trip. I used to actually go all the way under the water. Like I might go to Jamaica, anywhere, to an island, go all the way under the water and bask in the silence. You know what I mean? The lack of judgment and everything that lies in that water. But then when you come back up, your phone messages is full. You got 200 missed calls and so on. So your problems is sitting there waiting for you. You know what I'm saying? So these little escapes, I know everybody that's listening that had any money, wealth, success, probably still going through it right now, whether you want to admit it or not. It gets to a point where, I'm not trying to push anything or impose anything, but for me personally, I was looking for an out, but I didn't know where that out lied. So when I found Islam, and I knew it to be the truth, I knew it to conform with my natural disposition, meaning I want good, just like everybody else. You're naturally designed to want good. So, definitely.
Yeah, that's really deep. I love that as a point to reflect on here as we land this particular private IG, which is like a private plane, my guy.
Yeah. It's your private plane. It's Ari joint.
But I love the way you teased that out and made us think about it. And obviously, because you've had these highs and lows, I think you have a lot to offer. So I think the fact that you're doing this other programming will be very interesting to obviously a lot of people. And this is a beginning for us because, like I mentioned, Kim introduced us here to have this convo. I'm going to put this up for folks looking for it. It'll be up on Ari Melber on IG. And by the way, if you want to follow, I'm doing more with music at Nebuary Radio. I remind people of that. It's in the comment down there. Because we're doing a lot of playlists there with Apple Music Hits.
Okay.
But Loon, I hope that this was one step virtual. I hope I can get to meet you and keep track of what you're doing now that you're on to all these other things, sir.
Absolutely. I would tell you, keep in touch with Kim, because she's probably the only person aware of my movements and everything I got going on, because she's my partner, and we have a production company together. So, we're working on a lot of things right now. And I would just say keep in touch with Kim, and inshallah, which means if Allah wills or God willing, we'll meet in person and we'll be able to, chop it up a little more.
I hope so. I appreciate your spirit, and Amir, nice talking with you, man.
Nah, definitely, it was been a blast. Thanks, Ari. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Well, that was nice. Even though we're dealing with some serious stuff, I hope you guys were able to take something from that. As I mentioned, I'm going to put it up. So again, you can follow Nebuary Radio. You can tune in at The Beat with Ari. You can obviously check Loon out there at his handle. And again, thanks to Kim Osario and everyone who was here for this conversation. I feel a little uplifted by it. Peace.